Coming up, taking care of a grand old lady, news from around the world flights.
Restricted airspace isn't as restricting as you might think. And a new look for us. AOPA Live this week begins in just a moment.
It's been called the most sophisticated single-engine airplane ever. But to the people whose loved ones are alive today, it's called a lifesaver. The Cirrus Airframe Parachute System, only from Cirrus Aircraft.
An old friend gets a facelift. Hello everyone, and welcome to AOPA Live this week. I'm Melissa Rudinger.
And I'm Tom Haynes. Thanks for sharing some of your time with us. If you logged on to AOPA.org Wednesday night, you saw something that looked a lot different. Welcome to AOPA Web 2.0.
A whole new look, but everything is still there.
It's still the same AOPA, it's still all the same great content, videos, AOPA Live, articles, community of people that you can connect with, but really it's just better. AOPA.org is the largest and most visited website in the world when it comes to aviation, bar none, by far. And what we wanted to do with this change and with this improvement is make the site more lively, make it better, and frankly make it more helpful to people, from anybody considering flying, to student pilots, to pilots that have been flying with AOPA for decades. Really a place for every one of these groups to be able to come in, get what they need, read the content, and frankly feature aviation in its best light possible.
Hard to believe, but AOPA has been on the web since the mid-1990s. The look has changed through the years, but the content and the services you want have always been there.
The new website features a lot more images and video to celebrate flying. The tools you use to fly are right up front and easy to find. And we're pretty excited about the new Go Fly section.
We've started working on that 3-4 months ago, and we have so many more plans and so many great things that are going to be going into that section, all in pursuit of giving everyone, from those that are interested in flying to the ones that have been flying for 20 years and have a Mooney and are ready to go, the tools, the ideas, and the inspiration to just fly more, start flying, and fly again.
You know what's remarkable is I remember before the World Wide Web, when AOPA was putting content out through CompuServe and then later through something called Jeppesen Online, so it goes way back. But now to a different kind of sharing. Did you know that special use airspace really is shared airspace?
That's right, Tom. Some pilots think that restricted areas and military operations areas are pretty much for the exclusive use of the military. But Warren Morningstar is here to tell us that restricted isn't as restricting as you might think.
Hey, Melissa and Tom. Well, let's say you want to go to Beaufort, North Carolina, right here on the Outer Banks. Now, a lot of pilots would look at that and they'd see all of this restricted airspace around it and they'd say, oh, heck no, I'm not going to fly through that. But really, it's not all that daunting once you understand how it all works.
Cherry Point approach serves the military and civilian customer.
Gunnery Sergeant Louis Cruz is the training chief for air traffic control at Marine Corps Air Station Cherry Point on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Cherry Point handles both civilian and military aircraft in what looks like a wall of special use airspace. But it's really not all that impenetrable. So let's start with Alert Area A530.
An alert area is exactly how it sounds. It's an area for pilots to remain alert and vigilant of their surrounding airspace.
Now you can fly through there without restriction as long as you stay clear of the Cherry Point class Delta.
We have multiple high-speed aircraft departing out of Cherry Point going to either location, whether going north or south into either of those airspaces. So while a VFR or IFR aircraft can operate in an alert area and there are no requirements to operate in an alert area, once again, it's advisable to contact Cherry Point ATC so we can provide those traffic calls in regards to where an aircraft may be departing.
Now, VFR aircraft can also transit a military operations area, or MOA, without restriction, but it's still better to talk to air traffic control.
An F-18 or F-15 might be transitioning at 15,000 or 10,000 feet doing 400 knots, and right off the nose we'll be assessing doing 80 knots, 100 knots.
Now, normally ATC won't route IFR traffic through an in-use or hot MOA, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
If you talk to Cherry Point Air Traffic Control, we can give you a specific altitude that we will deconflict with the using agencies to fly you through there. For example, if you're at 8,000 feet, we can obtain a block altitude of 7,000 to 9,000 for air traffic control to use, while the fighter jets and the range control division will utilize all the other altitudes within those specific areas.
And finally, restricted areas. You really don't want to be in one when it's hot.
Some of the hazards a general aviation pilot may encounter in restricted airspace, for example, R-336 Alpha will be aircraft conducting high speed maneuvers, whether they're dropping inner ordnance or they're shooting rounds through surface targets. Or for example, R-336 Delta here to the south, they're constantly firing mortars or artillery. And we utilize those restricted areas to keep non-participating aircraft well clear to avoid those hazards.
But when a restricted area is cold, you can go right through it. And sometimes you can go through even if the fast movers are already playing there.
On the NOTAMs, Alpha is active continuous Monday through Friday, but that doesn't mean that we're using all of it at the same time. So as you as the aviator, if you talk to Cherry Point Air Traffic Control and ask for the status, or in essence ask, can I transition from New Bern to Okokoke at 3000? If the aviators are not conducting the bombing runs and they're just conducting formation flights in the upper portions, we have the authority to provide you that access through R-306 Alpha. So for example, we'll call to the using agency and tell them there's a light civil aircraft that like to transition at 3000. And they'll cap the military aircraft 4,000 above, and we'll tell you transition through Alpha or at or below 3,000 feet.
Bottom line, anytime you're near or in special use airspace, talk to the controlling agency.
Some general aviation pilots are afraid to talk to ATC, whether they might be lost or they're drifting to a special use airspace or even sometimes a fuel emergency. At the end of the day, you should not be afraid to ask air traffic control for help. That's what we're there for, whether it's to help you navigate or it's to point out the nearest airfield to you to make a precautionary landing.
And Melissa and Tom, Gunny Sergeant Cruz and some of the other controllers at Cherry Point are also GA pilots, and they say they really do want to help us civilians.
Thanks, Warren, and it's nice to hear they actually want to work with us.
Yeah, and I'm sure they can be a big help too.
Absolutely. And of course, we had reason for highlighting the special use airspace around Beaufort, North Carolina. Our first AOPA fly-in of the year will be there later this month. And if you're thinking about flying there, be sure to get the information you need beforehand.
So fly-ins are really cool and a lot of fun. Reading NOTAMs, kind of boring. So the Air Safety Institute has created a video that shows an overview of the arrival procedures for all of the fly-ins, and we'll do that for all of 2016. And the first one is the Beaufort fly-in. And so if you're going, please be sure to check out that video and also download the full pilot information packet that'll help you get there safely.
The Beaufort fly-in is May 20th and 21st. You can find the fly-in procedures, check the seminar schedules, and see what else there will be to do in Beaufort at aopa.org/fly-in.
So here's a question. If something has been around for 13 years, can it still be considered temporary? More than a decade ago, Congress ordered the FAA to establish TFRs around Disneyland and Disney World. Guess who lobbied for that? Well, now, after 13 years, those temporary flight restriction areas will be charted. AOPA had pushed for that so that pilots wouldn't be caught unawares by the Mickey Mouse TFRs. They're now called, get this, Special Security Notice Permanent Continuous Flight Restriction Areas. So, Melissa, we're definitely going to have to deliver and create an acronym for that, don't you think? Because in aviation, that's what we do.
That's going to be a tough one. Solar Impulse 2 is trekking slowly across the U.S. on its trip around the world, avoiding TFRs, of course. The solar-powered airplane successfully landed in Phoenix after a nearly 16-hour flight. Thanks to a tailwind, top speed was blistering, by Solar Impulse standards, 100 knots. Solar Impulse 2 is headed to New York, but no word on where it will stop next. And speaking of around-the-world flying, welcome back, Tom. You have been, last week we left you in Germany with Adrian Eichhorn,
right,
and you joined him for several legs of his around-the-world flight. So tell us about your experiences.
Right. I did, and it was a great trip, but mostly I learned how great it is that we have flying in this country. Boy, nothing like it. Things as simple as filing a flight plan, for example, can be very complicated and tedious, even in Europe, which we think is more like US than not. Nonetheless, we flew over some remarkable parts of the world and got a sense of the costs, the fees, and challenges of doing so.
We're over the Mediterranean, about an hour out of the coast of Egypt. Never thought I'd be taking a little bonanza around the world and crossing the Med.
For Adrian, I think the real adventure began in exotic Egypt. While recovering from the high costs and handling fees, we got to check off an item on his bucket list, visiting the pyramids, and of course, riding a camel. As we tape this, Adrian is scheduled to leave Sri Lanka for Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. You can follow along on his website and see his progress at flybluehorizons.com. And if all goes as planned, he'll be sharing his tales of adventure at the AOPA fly-in in Beaufort, North Carolina, just 2 weeks away on May 21st. See you there.
Coming up after the break, she's a grand old lady.
But she needs an awful lot of tender, loving care. You're watching AOPA Live this week.
Welcome back. You're watching AOPA Live this week.
Some changes to report on the field at Santa Monica Airport. Flight school Justice Aviation is closing. The city is paying them nearly $500,000 to go away. The city is denying multi-year leases to other businesses on the field in an attempt to force them out. AOPA and other organizations are fighting to force the city to honor its obligation to keep the airport open through at least August 2023.
AOPA and 8 other industry groups are urging the FAA to work swiftly to implement Part 23 reforms on aircraft certification. The group said that the agency should issue a rule by the end of 2016. That's only a year later than the deadline that Congress gave the agency. AOPA has called the delay inexcusable. The Part 23 reforms will make it easier to install aftermarket safety products and speed the certification of new equipment and aircraft. Turning now to a truly classic aircraft, Fifi currently is the only flying Boeing B-29 Superfortress. You may have seen her at air shows, wowing the crowds, or recently on AMC's Better Call Saul.
But AOPA Live's Paul Harrop shows us for each moment in the spotlight, there are many more tedious times taking care of Fifi.
The grand dame of all warbirds. The mother of all airshow acts. The biggest, baddest show of air power is a bit high maintenance. No fussy complaints or outlandish demands, though. This old performer just has a lot of needs.
It's the normal wear and tear of the aircraft, tire changes, things of that nature, brake pucks have to be changed out. Every so often we have to do a cylinder change or a component change, but it's just normal day in and day out of maintenance, really.
But on an airframe that's approaching 80 years old, that takes a team of 3, led by Senior Crew Chief Rick Garvis. They work out of a hangar at Meacham Airport in Fort Worth.
We have an extensive pre-flight, post-flight, and weekly inspection that we do continuously on this airplane. If we're not flying it, then we're maintaining it.
They estimate that for every hour of flight, there are 300 man-hours of labor that go into keeping this airplane in top condition. Today, they're getting ready for one of their bigger challenges.
Maintaining her on the road. That's the most challenging. And technically, usually there's only one crew chief flight engineer on the airplane at a time. So it's a lot of bird for one guy to take care of.
But an ounce of prevention on this massive bird is a ton of work.
Every time we go on tour or come off tour, we'll audit the aircraft, basically pull everything out, look everything over, see if there's something that needs to be replaced, changed, or added, and then we'll restock it. That way we know exactly what's on the aircraft at all times.
Well, you've got to make sure that have everything that you need or you think you might need. That's kind of the key, is think you might need. Make sure everything that you take with you is actually serviceable and fits on this airplane.
And everything that goes has to go into Fifi. The big bomber turns into part cargo carrier with one or more of just about everything.
The aft bomb bay has become actually the maintenance bomb bay. We actually have a platform in the back where we actually store all our parts and pieces and actually from time to time work on stuff in there.
Don Thurston is an assistant crew chief. He's sorting through all the parts and pieces needed for the next tour. This really is a dream job for him.
Well, first off, I love turning wrenches on old machinery. That there's no electronics, there's no computers. So, and then the veterans, when you're out on tour and you see the guy come up to the airplane and, he's like, yeah, that used to be my seat. And he's pointing to a gunner's window or the flight engineer seat. And you get to talk to them and find out, how they treated the airplane, what they went through.
It's very humbling when you get to talk to them and you see them having their special moment in the airplane.
All made possible through many hours of work by these dedicated A&Ps and dozens of commemorative Air Force volunteers. In Fort Worth, Texas, Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
Thanks, Paul. Fascinating old airplane. Fifi and her crew are getting ready to head out on this summer leg of the Air Power History Tour. If you'd like to catch a ride on the old girl, head to airpowersquadron.org to find out how. And that'll do it for us this week. Thanks for watching.
And we'd love to hear from you. You can email us at aopalive@aopa.org. We hope to see you here next week for another edition of AOPA Live This Week.